Hey, this is Steve Zeltzer with Workweek, and I'm speaking this morning with Professor Rabab Abdulhadi, and she is the professor at the AMED Program at San Francisco State University. She has been involved in a struggle to get the voices out of people of the Middle East and the fight for Palestinians and others in the Middle East. And she's in the Department of Ethnic Studies at San Francisco State. And your department and your students have been under a long attack by Zionists and others who want to shut down the program there. And we're talking about a program that really is the only program, to deal with this issue, the Palestinians and people of the Middle East, from a perspective of their struggles. And so welcome to Workweek.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Steve. I'm happy to be back.
Why don't we first talk about your program and your struggle to defend your program? And I know that the union, California Faculty Association, has been also involved in the fight to defend you and your program.
Well, the AMED Studies program, Arab and Muslim Ethnicities and Diasporas Studies, was started in 2007 when San Francisco State University recruited me from my job as director of the Center for Arab American Studies at University of Michigan, Dearborn, to specifically initiate this program. So it will become the 5th department in the College of Ethnic Studies. It's not actually a department, it's a whole college. In addition to American Indian, Africana, Asian American, at the time it used to be RASA, now it's called Latinx Studies. And so that was the basis on which I came to San Francisco State. San Francisco State made multiple commitments to allow me to build the program, on which conditions I would not have come if they hadn't satisfied them. One of them is to actually provide us with a critical mass of faculty, to hire 2 other faculty, tenure track faculty members in addition to me. One is to provide us with operating budget, with staff, and so on. And actually at the time I was told that there were 12 faculty members at San Francisco State whom I was supposed to steer into building this program from various departments. And so I said, that's fine, but I really would like us to have a critical mass of at least 3 faculty members. I asked you actually for 3 more in addition to me, 4. And the negotiation between me and the university, we ended up having 2 in addition to me, to 3 faculty lines. That means that 3 faculty lines, if you want to talk about the classes, you're talking at the very least 9 courses each semester, if you want to talk about that, in addition to building the program, in addition to scholarship and service, which is what professors at San Francisco State are supposed to be doing. The problem is that under Zionist pressure, the university professor, Robert Corrigan, basically canceled our sessions in 2009 and then proceeded to defund the program completely. So it's been since, let's say, 2010, 2011, that I've been one faculty member. I do bring in community lecturers to speak. I basically have to fight every semester from the beginning to bring lecturers to teach and so on. I select the classes, I look at the schedule and so on. The problem is San Francisco State has been fighting me tooth and nail at every single level, both in terms of our academic program. So they're really, really trying to gut the program. So the most recent attack, and I can't go into the whole history because we don't have enough time to do that. I mean, we have been on your program before, but I can just say that they've used the excuse of COVID-19 and whatever they claim to be budget crisis and so on, in order to actually cancel 2 Palestine-specific courses that we were going to offer this fall. One is called the Palestinian Mural and the Art of Resistance. And this is also reflective of the student struggle of the university, that we have the Palestinian Cultural Mural Honorary late Professor Edward Said, along with the other murals that represent multiple other struggles, which is a legacy of San Francisco State, that they've canceled that course. And then the other course is called Comparative Border Studies, Palestine and Mexico, which they've also canceled. And I've been, since spring 2019 until now, I've been fighting to get the classes reinstated. The union has supported me in that. California Scholars for Academic Freedom have actually written multiple letters to the university president. I have, through the union, I have gone through, I have multiple grievances to actually demand that we want the courses back. But not only did they keep these courses canceled, and basically they canceled and they said there was low enrollment, but I always ask, how come you did not wait until we actually allow students from CSU? So now we are able to actually get students from the 23 campuses at CSU. Why didn't you wait until students can actually select the courses on them. But first they hid them. They said, we're just hiding them. Then they canceled them altogether. And then they said there is no enrollment. How are students going to enroll in courses if they don't even know that they exist? Then they proceeded to actually threaten me with canceling one of my courses. And then they asked me to create flyers and publicity for it, which I did. They never publicized the course at all. But then they threatened me to cancel it. And then they went ahead and canceled it and actually forced me to teach a course of Intro to Ethnic Studies. That's not part of my job description. My job description is come to build the AMED Studies program to offer courses in AMED Studies because I'm one person faculty member, actually. The other problem that's going on is that they really want to consider AMED Studies to be a subordinate of another department instead of its own program. So instead of AMED becoming the fifth at the time, now the sixth department in the College of Ethnic Studies, AMED now is only seen as an initiative, an academic minor by the administration that would like to get it. In addition to that, we have been targeted for our own, for my own scholarship. We've been targeted for our own webinars that, we've been doing multiple very attractive webinars and on Palestine, and also not only on Palestine, on the question of connecting justice in for Palestine with the question of the indivisibility of justice. So for example, we had a webinar in July on Black Lives, Black Liberation that attracted 9,000 views. And this is all, voluntary work that we're doing on our own. We had a webinar on indigenous brown Black communities on reparations and police abolition. So now we have two webinars coming up for specifically in collaboration with Women and Justice Studies that my colleague and I are doing. One is on gender justice, and one is on sexual justice. And these follow the two webinars we did in the spring. So we're doing them in addition to any multiple other webinars, including the one we did with the Palestinian students on the anniversary of the Sabra and Shatila massacre last week. One is going to be on the mural anniversary that we've invited you and many other of the strikers from 1968 to come and speak on. One on the 50th anniversary of the Black Statement on Palestine from November 1st, 1970. It will be the 50th anniversary. We have several people participating. But we have been targeted again and again because targeted, and I would say by Zionist groups who are targeting our program, because I believe one of the things that they are very disturbed by is actually speaking about the question of justice in for Palestine at the time when Israel is unable to actually defend its position in suppressing Palestinian rights. And Zionist groups in the US, what I call the Israel lobby industry. And I say industry because it's a network. It has its own structure. It has its own money. It has its own political commitment, political connections. They are basically trying to silence. They're trying to silence any discussions in Palestine, censor us, violate our academic freedom and freedom of speech. On top of it also, they are also trying to prevent us from actually linking with other communities. So we are very much linking with anti-Zionist Jewish groups and individuals. We are linking with the strikers from 68. We believe that this is the role of education, what you all struck for over a year in 1968 and demanded, we are doing, bringing the community and the university together, making knowledge democratized, bringing knowledge from outside of the university, letting students engage with elders and leaders and so on. So they would like to stop that altogether. And the university administration that has become so corporatized, that is being run like a corporation, not really like an academic institution, like a public institution, has basically towed the line, the Zionist line, because they also receive tons of dollars and money from Zionist dollars. And I do know an authority, and I know that this happened this past week, the university president and administration received a letter from the executive director of the Jewish Federation of San Francisco, Jewish Community Federation, which peddles millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, and who is also in charge of donor relations, telling them that you cannot have this webinar this coming Wednesday, where we are hosting a historic conversation with Leila Khaled, with Palestinian feminist icon and militant and feminist leader Leila Khaled, along with 4 other people, Ronnie Kasriels, who's a very well-known anti-Zionist leader in the liberation struggle in South Africa, in the anti-apartheid struggle, Laura Whitehorn, who is a very long-time former political prisoner, also anti-Zionist Jewish activist, and with the director, Rula Abu Daha of the Bir Zayt Institute for Women's Studies, and also with Seko Odinga, who is a Black liberation struggler and leader. So they would like to silence us. They're actually trying to do all sorts of things, including Zionist groups have been mobilizing against it. They are saying that, and now the recent thing is I received from the university provost saying that me and my colleague who's co-organizing the webinar with me, we received an email telling us that this might be considered criminal. We should not be having the webinar and so on, that academic freedoms are limited by charges of criminality, which we believe is not right, it's not fair. And so we don't believe that this is correct. We think that this is a way for us to be silenced further by the university administration as well, acting at the behest of Zionists and right-wing groups.
And the actual, some of the violence or threats, there have been posters put up on the campus accusing you of being a terrorist. Students have been attacked, Facebook pages. So it seems like the real assault on democratic rights and the right of professors and students to organize has actually been organized by the Zionists against you.
And tolerated by the universe. So we had 4 sets of posters actually put up by David Horowitz, Freedom Center. Everybody knows he's a leading Islamophobe and a leading right-wing racist person who attacks Black lives, who attacks sanctuary, who attacks everybody. And the Canary Mission, which is we discovered was a shadowy site that is not just about me, it's about me and about students and about community. So the names of students were posted, we were accused of terrorism, we were accused of what they call Jew hatred. And so it was intimidating, and the university left them up saying that this is freedom of speech. They were weaponizing freedom of speech for the interests of the right wing. The students, I have received death threats, multiple death threats, and the death threats actually increase every single time I get to receive a threat from the university, from the provost or the president condemns me, or the chancellor of CSU condemns me. There are more death threats on my voicemail, in emails, in letters. Actually, the last threat was a letter that was sent to me via the university president's office, that the university sat on for almost a month without actually letting me know that there is a threat against me.
So what you're saying is that the university officials are actually covering up and doing damage control for these people and organizations that are actually making death threats against you and in the past against students. They're silent about those.
Exactly. They're actually not silent. I mean, if they were, silence might even sometimes could be construed as neutrality, even though we know there is no such thing as neutrality in questions of justice and injustice. As Bishop Tutu said, it amounts to complicity, but that's not being silent. They're actually emboldening and encouraging these groups to continue. So for example, the op-ed piece that the president of the university published this week in the Jewish Weekly, which is the newsletter of the Jewish Community Relations Council, has been targeting us right and left, day in and day out, for multiple years now, is actually quite Islamophobic. It's quite catering to a Zionist discourse. It actually reproduces the same charges in which the Lawfare Project, which is a right-wing pro-Israel group, sued me and the university over for 18 months. We defeated them big time. The judge they dismissed the case with prejudice, but the university president actually reproduced the charges, the false charges that I have been accused of by Amcha Initiative, and there were multiple audits in 2014 by the university, and every single one of them cleared me. All these charges have been proved again and again. They are untrue, that it is not true that I'm anti-Semitic, and on the contrary, that I actually fight against anti-Semitism. And I work very closely with many historically Jewish comrades, sisters, and brothers, day in and day out. The whole charges of terrorism and catering to terrorism were also defeated. Everything was defeated by the judge in a federal court. He actually said, just because she's anti-Zionist and supports Palestinian resistance does not make her anti-Semitic. Nonetheless, the university president actually reproduced all these false charges, this smearing, this defamation that was in this lawsuit that we defeated in her op-ed in NJ Weekly. And it's catering to donors. I mean, this is catering to donors, catering to a right-wing agenda, and also catering to Islamophobia and having a very low bar on discrimination and racism at the university campus, which is supposed to be for social justice, by the way.
And we're speaking with Rabab Abdulhadi. She's the professor, the only professor at the AMED program at San Francisco State University. And one of the arguments that they're making, the Zionists are making in Jewish community relations and these organizations that are attacking you, is if you're critical of Israel, apparently you're anti-Semitic. What's that all about, this idea of equating anti-Semitism with being critical of Israel?
Well, I think, as I said at the beginning, I think this is the Zionist groups with all their might and strength and so on are unable to cover up for Israel. They cannot justify what Israel is doing as something good and just. Everybody who knows Israeli action, more and more people, even in the United States public, are sympathizing with Palestine. So they are trying to target those of us who are in the academy, who are speaking up inside and outside of the academy, who are speaking up, who are engaging the public and saying this is what Israel is doing is wrong, and Israel should be held up to the standards of everybody else, like any other country. Now they don't want, they would like to exceptionalize Israel. So what they do is they label and they smear anybody who opposes Israel as anti-Semitic. And what we say, and they say that being anti-Zionism, actually opposing Zionism, which is a settler colonial project that colonized the land of Palestine, which has been opposed historically by many Jews too, not only Jews and non-Jews. It's anti-Jewish and anti-Semitic. And by that, they actually try to say that they speak for all Jews. And we know historically, Zionists have not spoken for all Jews. And contemporary Zionists have not spoken for all Jews. And I always say Zionism is a passing phenomena. It is a phenomena, and it is now trying to strangle us, but it's actually a passing phenomena. There have been multiple people before, multiple people after, and multiple people today, voices and intellectuals who actually argue how against Zionism, and they argue that Zionism is not the only game in town, not the only recipe to actually fight against anti-Semitism. The way what I advocate also building up the voices of many anti-Zionist Jewish scholars is the way to fight anti-Semitism is to connect with people who are fighting against all forms of racism and racial discrimination, not to actually single out and exceptionalize anti-Semitism and put it in a separate thing from anything else. We need, and it's also, and one of the things that actually the Zionists do, which is very interesting, because they say they're fighting against anti-Semitism, and then they label all Jews with the same brush. They say Jewish, there is only one single Jewish experience across time and space and everywhere else. And we say, that's the essence of stereotyping and racism. Jews have different experiences, multiple voices. We're not saying that there isn't one expression of Jewishness that's Zionist, but that's only one expression. It's not the only expression. So they're really very bothered when I keep asking the question, who owns Jewishness? They are very bothered by that because there are multiple voices and they really need to silence. They would like to also silence and dim the voices of Jews who are standing up for justice and for Palestine. So even the university president, when she said, oh, I talked to Jewish students and I talked to Jewish community members and so on, she only talked to Zionists. She only talked to one brand. First of all, she didn't talk to me. She didn't talk to any of us. So none of us have been actually reached out to. Nobody has reached out to me anywhere from the university except with a threatening email from the provost on Friday telling me that what you might be engaging in might be considered criminal and violation and so on. And we actually got the legal teams and so on, and they all said this is not true. This is actually scare tactic, intimidation. But what the university president is doing is actually reproducing the same Zionist narrative, which is actually a disservice to Jewish communities. I'm not only the one who's saying it, I'm actually following the lead of our sisters and brothers in the Jewish community who historically have written about the diversity of experiences, which is one of the strongest antidotes against racism and against anti-Semitism. So they're basically banding up. And by the way, the attacks against us is not only by Zionists. I should say that there is a very strong right-wing attack coming from right-wing white supremacist groups as well, which also ally themselves with the Zionist movement and the Zionist groups.
And actually, a Nazi came to one of your classes, apparently.
I had a Nazi, not only, he's a neo-Nazi and actually white supremacist, who had posted at least 250 posts on Instagram and Facebook against Jews, against blacks, against women, against Arabs, against Muslims, against immigrants, had a big swastika tattooed on his abdomen and so on. And we went to the university and we said, we're really worried about the violence that this might incite. Actually, the university brought the neo-Nazi student in and counseled him on his rights and told him that he could go, if anything he needs, he could talk to the university, which is very interesting because in 2013, the Zionist groups accused one of the Palestinian kids who was active in GUPS, in the Union of Palestinian Students, of posting something against Israeli soldiers, and he did it when he was a very little kid and so on. As a result, the Palestinian student was actually banned by the university president, by the university from coming to classes for a whole year. He could only take online classes. He was forced to resign from his position as the president of GUPS. He was not allowed to participate in any student groups. He was completely banned from all of it. He was, at that time, he didn't go too much public with it because he was worried about trying to go to Palestine and being targeted by the Israeli intelligence. And what happened is that the university president himself, President Wang, actually said that the students was investigated by the FBI, Homeland Security, and the Israeli consulate. This is the university president. And then when we have actually a Nazi in my class that is threatened, that the students felt really, really threatened by, the student was actually banned, you know, and almost was not able to graduate. I mean, so there is a very disparate treatment between what happened with the Nazi. I mean, and then when I'm telling you about the right wing, we know that at the same time there was a Nazi in my class. The Muslim Student Association and the Muslim Women Student Association, young women went into the office they share, and they found the guy who's naked from the waist down, standing on their prayer rug. And the students were very horrified with it. They were so afraid. And so one student signaled another student, because actually it turns out that the MSA is on a stage at Cesar Chavez. Now it's been changed. But at that time, there was no signal. So she couldn't even say that she's feeling threatened. So she texts another student. Another student went to the university authorities and said, look, there is a naked guy. There is a guy naked from the waist down, standing on the prayer rug where we pray. And I'm really afraid. She was dismissed. Then the students came to me and showed me a video of the guy, seeing him coming out of the humanities building, walking side by side with the university cop. And I said to the students, how do you know it's a university cop? Was he handcuffed or something? They said, no, they were talking and walking and so on. The students took the video to the university authorities. The university authorities completely dismissed them. I took it to the Office of Equity and Diversity and so on. They're supposed to be investigating this. And then we went, 25 people went. Students came from all student groups, and we actually had a serious discussion, serious concern about the Nazi and about this, because we were feeling like our safety is also a threat. It's not only our academic freedom, our right to speak, it's actually our physical safety. And we were told by the police chief, by the dean, by one of the deans, by the university, by everybody else, that if you feel threatened, including by if you feel threatened, come and tell us. We said, we're feeling threatened. And they said, no, if you feel, and we said, so we have to be attacked physically for us to actually say something. They dismissed it completely. Not only that, it turns out that students have put up posters about the Nazi student, and the dean of the College of Ethnic Studies actually asked the police to come in and take him down altogether. So even students could not even have a warning that they just need to be a little bit aware for their safety. And then about the Muslim student, the naked guy, the students wanted to actually have an investigation. Then we were told informally that the police came into Cesar Chavez Student Center and scouted it. And we said, did they go to MSA office? They said no. We said, why didn't they go there? That's where the guy was. And so the university until now has not investigated it. And we were trying to kind of like press for like Jane Doe or John Doe or a collective complaint, and it's not allowed. You only have to, you put your complaint with your own name. So for example, some of my Jewish students refused to write it, because when they asked the university said, yes, the Nazi could know who you are. So the students got afraid. And then, the Muslim women students, they said, no, we're not going to do it. They had a whole week thinking about it. They said, we're not. Because first of all is threat, physical threat. And secondly, they've seen what happened to me when I complained, how much retaliation I've suffered. They don't want to subject themselves to that kind of, attacks and so on. So it's having a chilling effect. It has a silencing. It's making us very much live in fear and so on. Same thing happened last summer when I received the death threat from somebody who says that they are a New York City retired police officer. And the university, when I actually transformed my courses to Zoom, so I could teach my students while protecting the safety and security of my students, I was reprimanded by the DNI, by the department chair. And then they even kind of like assigned my class on Edward Said, not too far from the offices of a professor who continues to actively serve in the Israeli military. So there is complete disregard for our safety, for our security. It is about silencing, it's having a chilling effect on all of us. Not to mention, it's really threatening our safety and security. And on top of it, there is also silencing whenever we want to do any educational activities. So it's a very concerted campaign. It's multi-year campaign. The allegations are false. It's a noise pollution by the Zionists in order to actually prevent me from teaching what I want to teach and prevent us from doing what we want to do. This is really the goal of it. Unfortunately and sadly is that the university administration is actually collaborating and colluding with the Zionist and right-wing agenda. It might be for the donors. I think it is positive for the donors, but I think also there is the low bar on understanding what Islamophobia, what anti-Arab, what anti-Palestinian hostility is all about is very, very low at San Francisco State. Despite us 14 years we've been in the program educating, it doesn't seem that the university administration is doing what they want students to do, learn.
And we're speaking with Rabab Abdulhadi, and she's talking about her experience fighting for a program for students and for education on these issues. And one of the things that has also taken place is there's been attack on ethnic studies statewide. There's a struggle to have a program in all colleges and K through 12, and that was opposed by the Zionists as well. They tried to stop that.
Well, there is two sides to it. There is one was a struggle that actually now the bill has passed. It's a question how it's going to be implemented, called AB 1460, which demands that every student who takes college has to take one course in ethnic studies. So the bill has passed. Now is the question of the implementation. How is the implementation going to happen? Actually, the bill was opposed by the CSU chancellor. It was opposed by the leadership of the California State University. And so, not everybody supported it. And so that is now a big battle of what does ethnic studies mean? Does ethnic studies also include Arab Muslims and Palestinians, or ethnic studies stops and excludes people from our own communities because the Zionists have a serious problem with it? The other campaign is the ethnic studies model curriculum in the K-12 schools, which was already a plan that was proposed by a panel of educators to the Department of Education in the state of California. And of course, the Zionists came up and said that any teaching about Palestine, teaching about Palestinian struggle, teaching about Islamophobia, teaching about boycott, divestment, sanctions as a nonviolent way to resist the Israeli occupation and to hold Israel accountable, that's anti-Semitic. That's again anti-Semitic and should not be there because it creates bad climate for Jewish students. Again, we ask, you speak for all Jewish students? Do you speak for all Jews? And there were many Jewish students and many Jewish scholars and activists who actually wrote and said, no, actually, we would like this. We would like teaching about Palestine because justice in for Palestine, respect for Palestine is also part of our own freedom and our own respect and so on. But the Zionist movement is quite strong. It has resources, it has a network, it's an industry, as I said. So they pressure, and actually some of the legislatures, not everybody, but the legislature went along with them, which is led by the Jewish caucus, which is all Zionist agenda, has a Zionist agenda, right-wing Zionist agenda, by the way. And so basically that was stopped too. So that is also up in the arms as well. And part of it, I think it's really important to know, Steve, especially because you were one of the people who went on strike in 1968. So we would be doing what we're doing today, right? Part of the thing is that it's just like Ocean Hill, Brownsville, and elsewhere. It's always divide and rule. So the Zionist, right-wing, and the university administration go and tell our colleagues in other departments and say, do you want ethnic studies or do you want AMED studies? Do you want to teach about Palestine or you want to teach about Black, Indigenous, Latinx, and Asian people? And majority of the people say no. And this is the testament you asked me about the union. This is our pride and joy that we have an amazing union leadership, which we talked about when we talked about labor, I think last week, seems 1,000 years ago. And so we have a very strong leadership, the executive board of the union. We have union colleagues who are fighting for our rights, for AMED rights, for my rights, for students' rights, as well as at the same time for the right of lecturers who are being fired left and right, because also the university, as you know, CSU has $1.5 billion slush fund, supposedly for a rainy day. And then they say this is a rainy day, but they say they're not going to use that in order to actually address the budget crisis. Instead, they are laying off, as you know, staff. They have cut down lecturers, including our own lecturers in AMED. They are actually coming really squeezing the people who are working, their employment and so on. They're not providing assurances of sufficient protection against COVID and for the health and so on. They are asking people to overwork. They are asking everybody, like they're asking me. So I already have a grievance about being forced to teach courses that are not in my job description, and also being asked to teach 2 additional courses on top of everything that I'm doing. And then when we had the meeting with the university president, I said, and she said, oh, why don't you work with this person, one of her advisors, why don't you work with him to kind of like raise money and so on? I said, Professor Dr. Mahoney, let me just say a couple of things. One is that we've actually, the university is supposed to be funding the AMED Studies program. This program is not a special interest. We're not coming to you to give us a little vase or a little plaque or something. This is something that is required for the education of all students. All students need to learn about Arab, Muslim, Palestinian communities and so on. This is not something that is, unless you are saying that we're only ones who should worry about Islamophobia, nobody else should worry about that. And if you're saying that, that's discriminatory. Secondly, we've already done a lot of fundraising, actually, despite the defunding of the program by the university. We've done that, but then when the Horowitz put up the posters and the university did not respond, the community stopped responding. They said, we need to see some good faith from the university. And I continued building the program, by the way, without faculty, on my own, and with the help of the community, faculty allies. You know, we have an amazing community. We have really great community of justice. Thirdly, if you want me to work with this person, go hire lecturers for the additional courses that you're imposing upon me. And I will, maybe I'll free up a little of my time to do it. She said, no. I cannot afford to spend more. So you cannot afford to spend more, but you are actually me to even do more overwork. It's okay for you to actually impose upon me a pay cut, as well as discrimination, as well as change of my job description and so on. But it's not okay for you to hire people in order for me to go do the job of the university, because the university president is actually supposed to be fundraising. I'm not supposed to be doing the fundraising. That's the job of the administrators. But I was willing to do it, but I don't have the time, because I also have 4 student groups I need to advise, and the students are quite vulnerable. We are under attack day in and day out. And I'm teaching the courses. I'm running the AMED Studies program. I'm trying to continue the AMED Studies from being gutted completely by the university. And on top of it, you're actually asking me to do even additional free work on top of the work that I'm doing. That's quite exploitative. That's quite exploitative and quite discriminatory. And that's why we filed the grievance. We actually filed another grievance in August. And so there is continuous violations again and again, because the university is really acting like a corporation that's disciplines and shuts down and silences anybody who stands up and says, this is not okay. This is not okay. We want to teach about justice. We want to protect our students. We want to protect ourselves and our colleagues and the employees.
And the strike in 1968, besides fighting for ethnic studies and ethnic studies department, also was for open admissions for the right of all working class students to go to college in California. Right. It's the richest state in the United States. There are many billionaires who actually have benefited from the pandemic, and their wealth has grown tremendously. Billionaires. Right. And yet they're saying, apparently at San Francisco State and the university system, you have to depend on private donations if you're going to continue your program. And this privatization of San Francisco State and our public education system, I would assume that the logic of that is that only those who give money will get classes. So the Zionists, if they want something, they'll fund it. If they don't, programs such as yours will be shut down because there's no.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's really very interesting, because actually back in 2008, 2010, actually 2009, 2010, after the crash, the market crash and so on. They said they had a budget crisis and they forced us to go on furloughs, 10%, cut down in our salaries. We didn't get 10% cut in our work because, as scholars, academics, activists, and so on, every single moment we have, we do more work. We kind of like keep stretching the time because the time is also a resource because we are at a public university because we're committed to the students to public education. Otherwise, we will go into kind of like for-profit universities like the Trump defunct, thing that he was sued over, right? So we don't want to do that. We're doing it in order for the students. But the university actually basically said two things to us. My dean told me that when I was doing open classrooms, when we discovered the Nazis, she said to me, classes are only for the students, i.e. for the people who pay money, tuition. And I'm for free education. Anyway, I don't think anybody, I agree with open admission. And I believe in actually opening the classes so people in the community, we can all co-learn together. Students, community activists, and so on. We should not actually hog knowledge. Knowledge is not the property of only people who can afford it. Secondly, and some of our colleagues actually came up with a proposal that if people can only be taxed additional 1%, we would be able to solve the so-called crisis in education funding in the state of California. But they refuse to do it. And on top of it, they refuse to they're actually catering to the donors. So there is multiple always receptions and so on for people in Silicon Valley. The president of the university got so excited when she found that there is a lot of people in Silicon Valley who are Arabs or Muslims. And we were actually making the point that students graduate from San Francisco State, but they are very alienated from the university because the university is participating in a very discriminatory, racist, defamatory, smearing campaign by the Zionist bullies and their right-wing, neoliberal, and wealthy allies. And so, but the university, instead of doing that, actually like only is catering to those, and this letter that they received from the Jewish Community Federation, from the person who's in charge, the executive director, and the one who's in charge of funding and donors and so on. It was very interesting because the letter came in, I think it was September 14th, and lo and behold, there was the op-ed that the university president published in J Weekly. I mean, and it was very interesting because even the letter that she published was very different than the email that she sent to the university community saying, we oppose Islamophobia, we oppose anti-blackness, we oppose anti-Semitism, and so on. She removed all of that stuff. She only made it catering as if she is speaking to the donors and saying, don't worry, keep giving us money and so on. We will crush the Palestinians. We will crush AMED studies. We will crush those who are actually challenging. Don't worry, we will take care of it. We'll keep them in check. And just keep your donations, keep your money flowing, and so on, which is quite disturbing because it's more privatization of education. It's more secret deals behind the doors and so on. And it's departing from the mission of San Francisco State as a university for social justice, because that's historically the reputation of SFSU is the strike, and based on it is social justice. This is the reputation SFSU has, okay? And so they're actually becoming very distant from that. And we are paying the price for this corporatization, privatization, being too much intimately related to Zionist agenda and right-wing agenda. It's quite troubling.
And when we talk about influence, there's a big campaign, both Democrats and Republicans talking about the influence of China, the influence of Russia. Yet it seems when it comes to Israel and Israeli funding of institutions in the United States and campaigns to target professors such as yourself and others who are critical of Israel, there doesn't seem to be a problem with that, the role of Israel in the United States and operating through Jewish community councils and others. It seems like a double standard.
Yes, I mean, I think this is when we talk about exceptionalizing. Like we're going to be progressive except on Palestine. I mean, actually, that's not even a right thing because they're not really progressive on anything else either, But it's sort of like holding Israel to another standard, holding Palestinian to another standard, holding concerns that we have about Arab and Muslim communities to another standard, and then they're refusing to abide by it. I mean, the problem, I would say, Steve, is that there are so many challenges to that. They can no longer get away with it. I mean, they will, for every single, like, for example, I will receive this threatening letter from the provost saying that you might be engaging in criminal activities. which is very interesting. The provost is not even supposed to talk to me because I have lawsuits against her and grievances against her. She's actually supposed to go through other people that's supposed to be interim remedies, except that's being used also for further retaliation. So she writes to us and she says criminality and so on. And it took us 2 hours to just like find volunteer lawyers. One of the most distinguished lawyers in the Bay Area, Dan Siegel, was very well known, employment, distinguished Jewish lawyer, who actually wrote a letter to her saying, no, none of what the professors are engaging in is actually illegal. They are going according to the law. This is their right to have the classes, to open their classes, to hold their discussion and so on. And none of this that you are claiming is true. So basically, you know, we're putting San Francisco State on notice if you are going to silence. But the Zionists are really bothered by it. They're actually doing all sorts of, you know, campaigns, and they're trying to provide legal, which they've done before. I mean, I should say that this is not the first time that this happened to me. I've also been directly threatened by the provost in 2018 when I criticized President Wang for saying Zionists are welcomed. I said this is a huge, I think I should say insult or offensive to Arabs, Muslims, Palestinians, and our Jewish sisters and brothers for whom Israel doesn't speak. And so the Zionist groups removed they removed that phrase about our Jewish sisters and brothers. They only said, oh, she's threatening violence by Arabs, Muslims, and Palestinians. And then the university provost sent me an email saying, take down the Facebook page, which was the Facebook page that they're talking about, was the Facebook page of Jews Against Zionism, a Jewish student group on campus that I just shared, you know, their post. So she threatened me to take down the Facebook page or else disciplinary measures. She actually had it in her email. So I wrote her back, said, this is discriminatory, this is McCarthyan, you're trying to silence me. And I was at the time actually leading a delegation, part that was approved by the university, except they did not, you know, reimburse me for it, to Palestine. And I said, you're actually imposing on my time again. And so after that, the university president and the CSU chancellor condemned me. And after that, I started receiving more death threats, including voicemail on my office, which I shared with the university. Nothing has been in. They said that they cannot investigate any of the stuff, the emails, the letters, all of this stuff they cannot investigate. And we told them that sometimes we actually saw people went to AMED offices and so on. They don't care about that. And then this is the same university provost who actually issued a memo to the faculty saying that in observers of religious holidays, she said that Israel Independence Day is a religious holiday for Jews. And in the same memo, she did not include Eid al-Fitr and Ramadan, which are two of the major holidays for almost 2 billion Muslims. So I, you know, criticized that. Then she passed the buck to her assistant, said it's her assistant who's in charge. Meanwhile, the university provost actually is a scholar, is a medieval scholar who supposedly specializes in the Crusades. If you know about the Crusades, that period, medieval period, you do know it was about Christian colonists who were trying to take over Jerusalem. And one of the biggest battles were about Salah ad-Din and Richard the Lionheart. I mean, this is even this, it's in folkloric lore. It's not, you don't have to be a scholar about it. So how could you even forget Muslim holidays or what? And then also think that Israel Independence Day is a religious holiday for Jews. So actually, before I even said anything, I consulted with my, you know, sisters and brothers in various Jewish groups and Jewish Voice for Peace and so on. And they said, no, I mean, some of these holidays, actually, they have the list is very obscure. We don't know about them. But definitely, and then we checked and people said that even in Israel Independence Day is not considered to be a religious holiday for Jews. It's not even considered there. And Israel, quote unquote, Israel Independence Day is the same as Nakba, the anniversary of the Palestinian disaster, catastrophe, by which almost 750,000 Palestinians were displaced and became refugees in 1948 when Israel was founded. So it is something, it's continuing on and on. But what the moral of this story that I just put out the call to legal groups, and immediately I actually spoke to 4 lawyers and many legal groups and so on. And then the Dan Siegel, like, he wrote the letter to the university. So it's not, and he was the first one to do it. There were other people who were willing to do it. So this is the problem of the Zionist problem, is that they are unable anymore to say things and actually for people to accept it. So there are cracks in public opinion, in the university everywhere, in the union, in the student, in the faculty, people like you, in the strikers, everywhere. So they have a serious problem with that. That is why the bullies continue being bullier. I mean, bullies get bullier if you don't actually hold them accountable. So that's what they're trying to do it, and that's how they're trying to intimidate us. The problem is, one of the biggest problems is that the university administration is actually in collusion with that. And that's really a serious problem. But and it's not isolated from all the other factors, the privatization, the donations, and so on. It nonetheless does not make it okay. It does not make it okay that we're being exceptionalized, that we're being silenced, that we're being targeted outside of the university and inside the university as well.
Well, I want to thank you for joining us, Professor Rabab, and we've been talking with Professor Rabab Abdulhadi, who is the head of the AMED program, and apparently her program is a great threat to Israel and to the Zionists, and they're trying to shut it down, accusing her of engaging in criminal activity. And actually, it may be backfiring because more people are attending your program. If thousands of people are attending your program, that's even a greater threat to them.
We already reached over 1,000 people in the webinar. And so we're trying to, like, we're going to broadcast it live also on multiple platforms and so on to just make it available to its historic conversation. So we want to make it, this is our job as scholars. We have to provide that knowledge to people. I mean, this is what we do, right? Yeah.
And this seems to be a great threat to them to have this knowledge, this debate, and the discussion. So thanks for joining us on Work Week.
Thank you for having me.
We hope that people look at your programs and break the information blockade, which they're trying to do to shut down your program. So thanks.
And sign the petition that the students have initiated. It's already have over 1,000 people too. Yeah.
Great. And we'll put links to that on the program.
Yes.
So thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for having me.